Hello, and welcome to the Future Media Podcast. My name's Ricky Sutton. Here on this podcast, I talk to interesting people and I report on the collision of big media and big tech with some real life stories and some new innovations thrown in to spice things up. Today I'm diving into allegations that the largest, best known and most used ad networks served ads from the US government and dozens of the world's most famous brands onto websites that contained abhorrent child sexual abuse. And that the brand safety companies that publishers and brands pay millions a year to ensure this can't happen didn't catch it. This investigation has grabbed the attention of US senators across the political divide and sparked a senatorial inquiry. One of those aiding the inquiry is Ariel Garcia, the Chief Operating Officer at the Check My Ads Institute and the former head of privacy at one of the world's largest ad holding groups. It's great to have you back, Ariel, and I'm sorry it's for such dark reasons. Perhaps you can bring us up to speed with the investigation, which I think you did with another ad watchdog group, correct?
No, so actually, the way that this came to be was there was research that was just released by a firm called Adalytics. And in that research, essentially, he was researching something else, something unrelated. And in the process of that research, he came across what looked to be a young child sexual abuse material, and it had ads next to it. He promptly reported that, and he kind of did some more digging to see what was on that website. And so the detail is, I'm not sure if you're familiar with peer-to-peer photo sharing websites. So that's what this was. This website was a peer-to-peer photo sharing website where you could upload photos anonymously. It had a bunch of settings that help people prevent things from being found by accident. So, for example, you can set photos to auto-delete. You can make it not indexed by search engines. I think Reddit blocks links from this site. So pretty, inherently high risk at a website level. And so in the report itself, what the report does, because of course he couldn't share CSAM in a report, one of the other things he found is that a lot of these advertisers had their ads running against adult and sexually explicit content. And then there was also piracy, right? So we're talking about content that brands decidedly don't want to be on or that is illegal. So that's the report. Where we became involved was we helped to coordinate with Congress around kind of what to do about this, right? Like who do we reach out to? So we were involved in the sending of the congressional letter. Where things stand today, there were 6 letters sent thanks to Senator Blackburn and Senator Blumenthal's leadership. They were sent to the CEOs of Google, Amazon, DoubleVerify, which is a verification and brand safety company, Integral Ad Science, which is another one of those companies, the Media Rating Council, which is a industry standards body, and Trustworthy Accountability Group, which is another standards body. They have until Friday to respond to those to those letters, to those questions. So far, it's just been, I'm sure they're preparing their responses. In the meantime, we here at Check My Ads filed complaint with TAG, Trustworthy Accountability Group, because they are a standards body that certified a lot of these vendors that ended up either transacting ads or measuring ads that ran on this website and against this content. So.
Okay, and so I've read the evidence bundle. It's pretty extensive. So what happened? Correct me if I'm wrong, but what happened was that they were actually investigating something else. They were investigating whether or not government advertising was being served to bots and whether there was, effectively ad fraud taking place, and that's what they were looking for. And to do that, they used a technology that looked back in time at websites going all the way back to 2017 to try and identify whether or not they could find effectively fraudulent advertising. And while they were doing that, they were tracking who was serving the ad. Was it coming from a well-known ad provider? Was it coming from a brand? Was it coming from the government? And they were trying to put these things together. And in that trawl, they came across this particular photo and video sharing website. It was a video as well, or just images?
I believe it's image sharing only.
Right. And so they came across this website that contained sexually explicit material, but they were still finding ads on the site from some of these governments and other bodies. But then as they were doing the research, they then found child sexual abuse material as well, what you refer to as CSAM, right? Or
Yeah.
CSAM.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's a kind of anachronism that the ad tech industry uses to describe this kind of material. And so they then identified that was happening, and then they did further investigations into this website. Okay. And I think they found that this website had previously been flagged as dangerous. Am I right?
That's correct. So the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC, had included this site on a list of known CSAM hosting websites since 2021. So there was ample time for this to have been mitigated, detected, identified, and stopped. And yet, for years, this funding of a CSAM hosting site went on.
So where I get this is obviously horrific, okay, and there's the investigation explicitly says, I think they found ads from the Department of Homeland Security and the U.S. government and other government bodies. I think there were a whole host of other very well-known advertising brands as well. Can you remember some of those? I think Nestle was on there.
Yeah, Unilever, Adidas. There were quite a few.
Yeah, dozens and dozens. And so we've got a situation. So I come from the publishing world, obviously. And so we would get hauled up regularly by ad agency groups that would say to us, look, we're worried about, brand safety. Okay. We don't want our ad for an airline to go next to a story about a security alert at an airport, for example. There is quite a gaping gap between that concern and having a US Homeland Security ad on an ad-funded website featuring child sexual abuse, where in actual fact the government is helping fund a website that circulates child sexual abuse. How have we gotten to a situation where the industry has torn itself from, I don't want to run it on a news site on stuff that's clearly appropriate, to sticking it out on the Wild West web where it's clearly inappropriate, and the bodies that are making money supposed to make this safe are not doing their job? How have we gotten here? I'm sorry to give you the really tough question, but that's what every public is asking.
It is, I have to say, particularly because of the subject matter here, it's really infuriating. As I was working on this complaint to the trade body and going through the standards and so on and so forth, you're picking through really meticulously crafted, loophole-ridden, very specific standards, mostly with no teeth. And yet I'm like, but there's nothing in here. There's no standard that said shouldn't it be on the vendors to do basic diligence of the websites that they're monetizing, such that if a website is on a list of known CSAM hosters, that it is not eligible at a website level, not at a page level or URL, all the places where all of the kind of technical excuses come into play. At a website level, this was a website that was on a list. Technically, it was more than feasible to stop it. But that's the thing, right? Because the way that these standards get created, it tends to be to the appetite of the largest participants in the working groups, right? So obviously it's beneficial to ad tech companies to be able to monetize more inventory. So why block an entire site if you don't have to? And from where I'm standing, it's like, well, you can't have it both ways, right? If the position is we didn't block the site, then there's no excuse for not having the capability to ensure that at an individual page level, you're not serving on abhorrent content. But when we're talking about a site that hosts CSAM, quite simply, should this not have just been demonetized? And why is that not a standard? Why is even the requirement to check if it's on such a list not part of the industry standards. I don't have an answer for how we got here other than the fact that, as you know, the commercial, like there's a commercial interest in maximizing what you monetize, and there's a commercial interest in not having to spend that much to do any compliance related work, due diligence, et cetera, right? It's quite simple. It's kind of like it's at its core a commercial issue.
Right. So I'm triggered. I'm triggered on behalf of my industry, if I'm honest. So the amount of work and due diligence that goes into the publication of a news website, okay, there's the training of the people. No one, by the way, no journalist ever goes into the job going, I'm going into this for the money. I promise you they don't. They go into it for the mission. They go into it because they want to report the news. Sometimes the news is good. Sometimes the news is bad. More often than not, the news is bad, okay? But the industry does it because it, A, feels that the public needs to know, and it spends a huge amount of effort in diligently reporting that news in a way that it believes is honest by checking the facts. And if you get it wrong, you get sued out of existence, okay? I've been sued for getting things wrong and had to admit it, and that's fine. We're happy to do that. But the industry has to be funded, and if it's trying to do that good work, then it should find a way to be paid for that. But it's the fact that 80 cents, maybe even more, you'd probably know the number off the top of your head, but 80 cents on the dollar of the advertising revenue that goes to the world at the moment doesn't go to professional content sites. It goes programmatically to places like this. But the safeguard, I think, for the industry, for the news industry, has always been, well, okay, we understand that there are now millions of different places to place your ad, but there are rules there to make sure that the ads are going to the right places. But the rules have clearly failed here. So rather than just sound indignant and upset, which I am on behalf of the industry, my question is more around the fact that we have industry groups that exist to put policies in place. You've just alluded to it. We have policies, we have rules, okay? Who's policing the policymakers? And who's ensuring that the policymakers aren't being overridden by a commercial imperative that says, well, Google's our largest investor and the largest ad network, and the only reason we get paid. I mean, have we got the poachers in charge of the rules here? How does it happen?
Yeah, I mean, that is exactly why we're so glad to see the senators include these standards bodies in their inquiry, because so far they've kind of just been in the shadows a bit. There's been some degree. Last year, there was reporting that the DOJ and NCIS were looking into verification companies, the brand safety companies. And part of what they were asking for is similar to what you were just talking about, is their conflict of interest in their business model, because they too work for both advertisers and for publishers, right? So that at least the verification firms started to be in the limelight, but there really hasn't been very much emphasis by the government on the trade associations that are supposed to be charged with setting standards for the industry. You hit the nail on the head. The trade associations, they're predominantly funded by, and so there's the trade associations and then the standards bodies, and they're all kind of intermingled in strange ways. But with TAG, for example, it's, people pay for certification. That pay to play model obviously has flaws with it. The MRC is a little bit different in that it's not the measurement firms that are the members, but the members that pay for membership in the MRC have an interest in having the measurement companies grading their homework getting verified as to the standards that benefit them. Does that, it's a little convoluted, but I hope that makes sense. So if for example, Google needs to say to buyers, oh, we have independent validation by an MRC accredited vendor, right? Then they have an interest in setting standards that they can live with and having their preferred measurement vendor accredited by those standards. You understand? I hope that makes a little bit of sense.
It makes a lot of sense. So I'll make something make sense. Okay. Google served the ad onto this website and someone got paid for it, and it funded the distribution of child sexual abuse. That system you've just described does not work. Clearly.
Yep. It does not work. Here's like some interesting things in particular, though, with Google. So I mentioned that in addition to CSAM, it also had pirated content on it. Google has kind of a transparency report about intellectual property violations, domains that have pirated content on them effectively. And this website was on that list as well. So Google has a list of domains with pirated content, and this website was on Google's list of domains with pirated content. But the other side of Google didn't stop ads from serving on this website. It doesn't make any sense. TAG, which is the trade body, has Threat Exchange, which in part, according to their documentation, I spoke to this in my complaint, it includes like a pirate domain exclusion list. They say they work with the industry's leading ad tech companies. Ostensibly, one would think, I mean, I asked this question, but one would think Google would be part of this threat exchange. Why, even on the piracy issue, why was that not shared? Also, Google stopped monetizing the site by the time this round of reporting happened. So if Google had known that, why was that information not shared? There's a whole lot of things that show that there was a breakdown at every level. And yet, instead of addressing why this website was being monetized for so long, a lot of the responses that you see from the players that were involved here are kind of focusing, especially I would say like DoubleVerify's response was, I have no words, but they're focusing on the minutia of their technology. And actually, kind of what they're saying is that their tech doesn't do what their marketing collateral suggests that it does. That, for example, they said in their statement that it would not be effectively realistic for them to scan every site on the internet. But no. You're an ad verification firm. We're talking about monitoring where the ads serve. That's not every site on the internet. And the reality is what they kind of suggested there was contradicted in reporting by a number of trade press articles where brands had their ads served on the site and all of their delivery on the website was marked 100% brand safe. The report also flags that some of that was served on adult content. So there was a failure at that level, like at the URL level. There is absolutely a failure on the website level, and everyone wants to focus on the latter piece, like come up with a technical excuse for why this happened, and instead of focusing on why did we not just vet the websites that we were monetizing. And you ask about how this impacts publishers. I mean, there's your answer, right? Like if there was a need to do some degree of legitimate know your customer diligence to vet the entities that are monetizing via your platform, right? Then absolutely that would benefit legitimate publishers, especially when we're talking about the age of like generative AI, when it's like a money-making machine. I don't even know what to say, you know, they're like, it's so I mean, I'll add some positive here for a moment. You have to imagine that we're reaching a tipping point here. It's simply not, otherwise it's the like open web programmatic would become so overrun with AI generated spam sites that it would become synonymous with garbage. You know what I mean? and so I hope that like these kind of conversations converge here, and that what we see from this is the recognition that it is time to do know your customer diligence for whatever websites these platforms are monetizing.
Amazing. All right. So I want to come back in a moment to the fact that this might be a transition point potentially for brands to head back to trusted sites such as publishing. But before that, I just want to be fair. We talked about Google a fair bit on this call. It wasn't just Google, right? So the ad tech companies or the ad tech vendors that are named in this report include Amazon, Criteo, Quantcast, Microsoft, Outbrain, and quite a few others. It wasn't only Google, okay?
Yep.
But one of the things that I've really had to focus in on in the past 2 years in my investigations into everything big tech, when it's talking about distribution across effectively 4 billion people and across hundreds of millions of websites, is that mother statements are inherently flawed. When they say we do this, that's just not the actual reality. And so what I've spent a lot of time doing is having a look at what actually happens, not what's said. Okay. And what we do know in this scenario is that these ads did appear on these pages. There is digital proof of that. And, we talked earlier on, about some of the major advertisers involved. Here you go. Here's a list from the report. US Department of Homeland Security, IPG, MasterCard, Starbucks, Pepsi, Honda, Uber Eats, Google Pixel, Amazon Prime, Sony Electronics, Adobe, L'Oreal, Domino's, Samsung, Paramount. I mean, this is like a big chunk of the global advertising community. Also, there were ads on this website of child abuse from the Wall Street Journal and Save the Children. This is broken. So that's my little outrage, okay? But let's go to something else, which is this doesn't get fixed in any scenario we're in the moment because it's not being policed, because capitalism in the form it's in today, okay, naturally goes to the money. That's its job, okay? And standards are meant to not do that. But if you allow the people that are making the money to set the standards, they're not standards at all. They're words on a page. How confident are you, and what's the response you're getting from the US Senate? Because ultimately the way this gets protected is through law or through government oversight. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, I think, from our perspective here, this should really be the inflection point where everyone recognizes that self-regulation has quite simply failed. I'm going to challenge the capitalism point just a bit because this is not working for brands. Brands are not winning. I'm not sure who's winning. In a normal capitalist system, in a normal healthy market, you would see the winners be the ones that deliver the best product or service, and that is not what we have here. So I don't think that I don't even know what to call this, but it is not working for anyone, and it's not a normal capitalism problem, right? Because brands are losing too. I think, like I said, the fact that we saw letters go out not just to the verification firms and the ad tech companies, but to the standards bodies is an encouraging sign. Because that's how we get to the point where we start to interrogate whether or not self-regulation is really going to cut it. We don't believe that it is, And so I think that the response that we're seeing there, we'll see what happens after the responses get submitted by these companies, But the fact alone that Congress is looking at the actual standard setters is an important milestone.
It is. Ariel, can I ask you, sounds like a bit of a dumb question, but it does go to working out what's actually going on here. Now, you spent years as head of privacy at Universal McCann, one of the big ad agencies, so you are perfectly qualified to answer this question. In the event that a brand, okay, let's just pick a brand X, a world-known, renowned high street brand, wants to place an ad, can you take me through the process of they want to place an ad on the web? What are they promised? And then in that chain, all the way from I've got an ad creative to it being delivered, who gets paid? Because ultimately that tells the story here. So there are many steps along the way where people are getting paid something, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So if I'm gonna go through a flow as though you're a larger brand. So if you're a large brand, you're probably working with a holding company agency, right? So you're going to go to your agency. Your agency is, we're going to talk programmatic, so they probably have a separate trading desk. So the trading desk is then usually they get paid differently, right? So like the account team that's doing the media planning is probably paid on a retainer, like on an FTE model type deal, whereas the trading desk is paid on like a commission model. They then are going to go to a DSP, and that's like the buying platform. Then that platform goes and talks to the SSP, which is the publisher's platform where they're making inventory available. And then ultimately it goes to the publisher. In between there, they're also going to pay the verification firms because since they're just kind of advertising wherever their alleged audiences are based on the data they also paid for, they need to verify that that's not an awful place using verification technology that doesn't work. So they're also paying for that. And so they're paying, and that doesn't account for whatever separate like audience modeling or clean rooms or all of the bells and whistles and all of this, so that we can end up on a site that hosts CSAM sometimes.
Well, this is my point. So you mentioned earlier on that you've got, I mean, how have we gotten to here? I mean, it's unbelievable. It clearly needs to be cleaned. Let's talk about that again. So I want to sell a washing machine. I go to my ad agency. My ad agency is on a retainer. Okay. My ad agency, I want to sell washing machines, millions of them in this scenario. I go with to my agency, who I'm paying a retainer, and they create my ad creative. They make it, and they say, we're going to distribute your ad across all of these platforms with the intention of selling X number of washing machines. Agency is paid. Client pays the agency. Washing machine company pays the agency. The washing machine ad is then created, and it's given to the teams that now have the job of distributing that creative to achieve the outcome of targeting 25 to 45-year-old white-collar professional new homeowners on the west coast of America. It goes out the door, and then it disappears into the wild. And a whole host of different programmatic agencies may be delivering that onto millions of websites that they think are safe because they've paid another link in the chain to say that those websites are safe. And that you may have checked it, as you said, against a clean room, which is a list of websites that we really think is safe.
No, sorry.
But you've had to pay something. Go ahead.
A clean room is like a data sharing platform. So okay. It's a little different. It's a different bell.
A different bell. Okay. So as you said, it's complicated. So I'm constantly trying to decipher it as I learn new links in this seemingly never-ending chain of people taking a clip of the ticket that ultimately fails to deliver any of the things promised. Okay. And so you're going down this chain. So now you've paid someone to tell you that those websites are safe. You've then served your ad onto that website, passing through a brand safety filter that you mentioned earlier on. So you're paying somebody there as well. So by now, it should have been completely groomed to only go to the right place. But we're learning through examples like this that doesn't work.
Yep.
When we really look hard, we find this all the time. This isn't a unique example, is it? It's happened multiple times. Yep. Your organization has done a lot of work in this space, right?
Yeah. And I mean, even in the complaint that I submitted to TAG the other day, like there were instances of TAG certified vendors that transacted or measured ads transacted ads on U.S. Treasury sanctioned websites, animal abuse, their piracy we talked about, but there was a previous instance of piracy. This happens all the time. There was a report by the ANA, which is the Advertiser Trade Association, that said that the average campaign has serves on 44,000 different websites.
I saw that.
Yeah. And so, like, if you think about it, one of the things I always ask is, if the promise of programmatic was supposed to be a more efficient way for publishers to monetize inventory and advertisers to reach relevant audiences, does anything about what we just discussed sound more efficient as it stands? And this is not, there's efficiency in like automating some of like the actual campaign, like the ad operations piece of things. I'm not saying we have to go back to doing direct IOs with each individual company. I'm talking more about like programmatic direct and legitimate guaranteed deals, working with a handful of trusted, working through a trusted supply path and using an inclusion list. You can still do programmatic that way. But this kind of carte blanche, like whatever's on the internet version of programmatic, the fact that we're still thinking about that as more efficient than anything is kind of wild when you sit there and think about what the supply chain actually looks like.
100%. And so if you carry on down that path, okay, so you've now got your washing machine ad. It's apparently only going to sites that are safe. It then goes on the site. Data is then picked up from that because all kinds of adding ad tracking technology is built into the ad or built into the creative or built into the destination site that then fires information back to the agency, or first to the programmatic, and then to the ad safety people, and then to the advertising agency, which is then presented back to the client trying to sell washing machines, that tells them this is what actually happened, that is patently not correct. Fair?
Yeah, like, well, it's more about, it's easy for things to be correct if you don't show very much detail. Like, I'm not like, so here's the thing. We talked about one of the points of failure being that there was no vetting at the website level, right? But the other problem here is that advertisers didn't have readily available access to their URL level reporting data of where their ads served, right? So it's not, even if they wanted to audit their campaigns at an actual page URL level, many brands reported that they were not able to access that from their vendors. They also weren't able to access that from their verification firms. Obviously, the verification firms, if they provide that level of detail, you have to figure it's going to make it harder for them to, like, it's the whole teach a man to fish thing. Like, why would they teach the man to fish when they can just sell them premium products, you know? So that's the other really big failure to understand here, that advertisers were literally powerless in the absence of that data to identify where their ads ended up.
And so just closing the circle on this, I'm not even sure how to describe it, this carbuncle of a technology solution that should be far better. I'm pretty certain that people going to a child abuse website aren't looking to buy a washing machine either. Right?
Right.
Yeah. So the people trying to sell the washing machines that are funding this entire ecosystem are not being serviced. To your point earlier on, the consumer isn't serviced. I'm not looking for a washing machine, thanks. And I'm not selling any washing machines, so I'm not being paid. Okay. So this entire ecosystem feels broken. Now, I want to just leap to a slightly different matter here, because this whole issue was front and center at the Google antitrust trial that you and I both followed incredibly closely. I remember listening to Stephanie Laser from News Corp talking about how, when she was asking for advertising detail from Google about, granular information about how advertising was served and delivered and what was being done, that they just refused access. And the judge raised the issue and so did the DOJ, that, Google, as soon as it built scale, didn't share granular detail and didn't feel compelled to do so. Okay. And so the whole point of the web, and I'm sorry to keep going back to such basic tenets of what this was all meant to be, but this is the truth. You get lost in this boiling frog market where things get ever so slightly worse, hundreds of millions of times and at the speed of light, and you forget where you came from. And the whole point of the whole point of programmatic was, when Google bought DoubleClick in 2007, was that we're going to provide addressable, measurable advertising. And instead of the old adage of, I spend $100, but I don't know where 50 goes, we're now in a situation where I spend $100, but I'm not really sure where any of it goes. But I do know for certain some of it's on child abuse websites.
Yeah. I mean, the way I describe this typically is, in a normal market, if you order something and you get something that is not what you ordered, you send it back and you get a refund. In this market, you have to fight to know if you got anything, what it looks like at all.
If you got anything at all.
Right. Yes. It is. So that's what is so absurd about the role of the standards bodies in all of this, right? Because it doesn't even appear to be a good faith effort in self-regulation. It's simply not passable. You know what I mean? I would hope that at a minimum, they're thinking long and hard about that, like over-indexing on lax, unenforceable standards and lack of enforcement overall, because it's a very basic common sense thing here to expect that brands can know what they bought. It doesn't get simpler than that.
So there's responsibility all the way up and down the chain to fix this problem, because there are many links in this chain. and they are all currently supporting each other to maintain this broken system. So one of the things I'll give you an example. I was in India a few years ago with one of the major holding groups, and they were very proud to show me their trading floor. Okay, they really wanted to show me how dynamic their trading floor was. And so I went down, and there were a group of creatives, and there were a group of ad targeting teams, and there were all these people working very diligently, doing incredibly sophisticated work. But when you got down to the bottom of the chain, when you got to the lowest paid people, the people punching details into keyboards, into screens to deliver the ads out to the World Wide Web, what I now call the Wild West Web, okay, those guys, there were 6 of them, and every single one of them had a Google employee in a Google t-shirt next to them showing them how to put it into Google's ad network in the holding group. And I said, why are they here? And they said, well, they're training. And I said, okay. And how is the training going? Because this is supposed to be super simple. And they said, well, the training is going quite well. I said, how long have they been here? He said, 8 months. So it wasn't a situation where they were being trained. They were literally punching the keys in the ad trading group. Okay. Now the client would be outraged, I would hope. Okay. So the question I'm asking, really, where I'm trying to go with this, is that the agencies are complicit because they allow the people to press the button. And the advertisers are complicit because they continue to give the money to the agency. So are they really entitled to feel outraged when they can just as easily tell their agency to move the ad campaign to publishers where they know the content will be safe? What does it take to move the industry away from the poisonous path that it's on to a trusted path? Because it's a decision. It's not a technical incapability. It's a mental choice.
So I would challenge a bit of that, because I'm not saying that it's not that advertisers bear any responsibility, but I think that you underestimate a little bit the degree to which there's a concerted effort across the supply chain, agency down, to keep the wool pulled over brands' eyes. Like, you look at the statistics, like from Tag just recently issued one of their like annual reports. I think they called it a fraud of fraud, like it was a fraud report, but it was something about like cost savings. They did the industry a favor by saving advertisers from paying like billions of dollars in fraud. Like, that was a favor. Imagine if your bank said something like, we saved you like whatever, 100K in fraud. What? Like basic expectations. So you have to understand, like, there is a concerted effort. There's the coziness of the advertiser trade association with the ad tech ones, like, the IAB, obviously, which also Google has a very heavy hand in, and how they interplay with the standard setting groups. And it's all very tied together. And if all of those entities are making brands think that when these things happen, they're an edge case, it's simply not. There's no reason to believe that most brands appreciate just how bad this is. That's why things like this are important, and it's why these discussions happen. It's why we certainly have these discussions in broad daylight, right? Because I think hopefully what comes out of this first and foremost is brands need to realize now that when they run with their tag certified and MRC accredited vendors, that means having their ads delivered on a site that hosts CSAM. It means having their ads delivered on sanctioned websites. It means having their ads delivered on child abuse. So clearly that's not working. That is the point of this. And I do think that when we are talking about something like child abuse, hopefully this is the wake-up call,
You'd hope so. So how much is the global digital advertising market? $700 billion or something globally?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's a big food chain. Yeah, and there's a whole load of people that have inserted themselves in there, and there's an awful lot of shareholder value in listed companies in that ecosystem that do not want this to change at all. Correct?
Yep.
And so there are a lot of vested interests. Let's put it like that. So we could ask them or try to shame them into changing. The experience would suggest that that's unlikely to succeed. We're going to get some press releases, some denials, some hand wringing. Somebody might get fired, but it's not really going to change anything.
No, we need regulation. That's
So
the answer.
yes, exactly. And so I suppose my question to you is, I have a million views on this. I'm raging internally, but I will do the right thing and throw it to you as the industry expert. What is the answer here? How do we solve this? Is it solvable?
It's solvable, but like I said, I think it starts with it's a twofold thing. First of all, we've already established self-regulation has failed. So we need actual regulation. We need to have something like know your customer rules for ad tech to be codified. We need the ad platforms that are monetizing these sites to have a responsibility to vet who they're allowing to monetize via their platform, right? Like simply for things like this, so that they aren't monetizing illegal activity, child abuse, etc. Then you need brands to be able to have readily accessible data on where exactly their campaigns aired. Once they have that, your point about like, well, brands could, then they would know, right? Today, they can't even know. So we need to start with brands having the right to be able to check their own ads, to empower them to do proper campaign stewardship. Then there's the elephant in the room that you alluded to before with the agencies. Like fundamentally, the biggest problem for the industry is the perverse incentive structure that exists, right? And a huge part of that is these brands rely on the guidance of their agencies. And so once the agencies stop deriving as much of their revenue from stellar client service and started deriving it instead from principal trading and like reselling media at a markup and like dodgy enterprise level deals with vendors where they too, like, you know, comparable to what happened in the Google trial, where they're getting paid by both sides. You have to fix that, right? But there are answers to that too. There should be a duty of care, right? They should have to prioritize they should be agents again. They should be agents on behalf of their client. So the thing is, like, these are not new things. These are things that exist in other markets that look similar. Certainly, like financial services. These are there is precedent here, and so that should give us optimism that it's a solvable problem. And now with the engagement of Congress on this issue, hopefully we're at a time now where we're going to see some real movement.
I had a conversation once with the CEO of one of the big 5 global agency groups. It was not dissimilar to this conversation. Many of the things that CEO told me are the things that you're telling me. The problem is well understood, okay, throughout the industry, from client, through vendor, through agency, through measurement, through DSP, through SSP, even to the sites that are deliberately taking the ad revenue by gaming the system. It is well understood. Okay? This isn't some secret source or some Pandora's box. Okay? It's wide open. Okay? And so I'm sat chatting to this agency CEO who's moving tens of billions of dollars worth of advertising. And I said to them, why? Why don't you stop? And their response was, Google's our biggest problem, and it's also our biggest customer. And I have no ability to stop it. We're not even commercially viable without them. Now, we've got an ad tech antitrust trial that's been concluded. We have a decision coming from a judge fairly soon. Have you heard? Do you know? Are you hearing when that might be?
No, it's like strangely delayed versus what was expected, but hopefully soon.
Yeah, I imagine there's a lot going on in the background, given that there's $340 billion worth of advertising in that Google industry. Well, probably 2/3 of Google's value, utter market value, is resting on that decision. Yeah, but it's due any time, okay? It feels like an opportunity to stop and reset because the industry probably needs it. If you're a publisher, okay, and you are, I always want to make these human, okay? The commercial director of one of the world's largest largest publishing companies rang me in tears on a Sunday morning about 2 months ago and just said, I've just run out of ways to fix this. The logic is so simple. Okay, we have an audience of highly engaged people who give a shit, who are coming to us 24 times a day, who are absorbing our information. We are the truth teller and the narrative holder of our community. Hundreds and hundreds of millions of people receive their information from us. I talk to people about the value that we represent, and everyone agrees. And every single quarter, my spend goes down by 6% and I have to lay off another 12 people. In tears, okay? A grown adult earning a large salary in tears because they've just run out of ways to figure out how to fix this. Can I ask you, you must know these people as well. You must have an affinity and an understanding of how they feel. What do they do? Is a fix coming? Are you optimistic for that? Is there going to be a reset?
Yeah.
Or is there just a total reinvention required?
So I don't think that the two are mutually exclusive. And I'm going to preface this by saying that before I tell you what I would do, understand that I'm the person that resigned from my C-suite role at the ad agency via an op-ed. So that is what I would do if I were a publisher right now. I would see that quickly the programmatic marketplace, as if things continue as they are today, with like no vetting of inventory, with generative AI, with everyone killing referral traffic, I would kind of see there as basically one solution, which is to create scarcity. I would only work, like I would not work with an exchange that's going to put me on a level playing ground with AI generated spam. And I know it's not the most, it doesn't feel like a practical answer. It feels counterintuitive, but you have to imagine that, again, it can't be that all of the ad exchanges allow their product to be just synonymous with absolute garbage inventory. You understand? So I think that the solution is in creating scarcity. It's not something that can happen overnight. I can tell you, like, the solution is not, you know, I know we're kind of in a weird place with the third-party cookie issue, but I remember when it felt imminent and everyone was talking about the alternative solutions, right? And so one of the popular ones required like people to log in, right? So it was going to requires publishers to get people to log in. I'm like, I'm sorry. So you're seeing that, like, the AI overview, Google's launching AI overviews. So you're worried about like traffic falling further. And the answer is going to be to take the little traffic that you have left and force those people to log in. Does that seem like it's going to work? Right. And so I understand that what I'm saying sounds extreme and impractical, but it is no less extreme. It is no more extreme or impractical than the solutions that are kind of being sold to publishers today as a viable option. You understand?
I do very much. I was there in a global publisher. I was at News Corp when programmatic first arrived. And I wish I had a time machine or I had a recording of the conversation, but I'll tell you how it went down. The commercial director at the time said to me, Ricky, this is going to make everything so much simpler. It's going to be cheaper for us. It's going to be cheaper for the client. It's going to be cheaper for the agency. It's going to be more measurable. It is the dream that we've been waiting for forever. And I said, and it's all going to be run by Google, right? And they said, yep, our ad partner, Google. And I was like, uh-huh. And who's going to make the most money from that, do you think? Is it going to be us or is it going to be them? And they were like, no, we're in partnership together. We've signed all the paperwork. I was like, yeah, that's not really been my experience to date, to be honest. I would be concerned. So what I actually said to them was, I said, look, The reason that we exist, because our audience is never going to be 200 billion people, or sorry, that's ridiculous, but it's never going to be 2 billion people or 3 billion people. We're going to have 600,000 or 700,000 deeply engaged fans. Our model, therefore, is that we're Harrods, not Walmart. Okay? We are the high end of town, which means our advertising needs to sell at $30, $40 CPM, not 34 cents, because we're never going to have enough volume. And this entire programmatic market is set up to sell volume at lower prices to try and create an ecosystem that means that everybody does well. But to do well, you have to have enormous scale. And the ones that have the largest scale are Meta and Facebook. And surprise, surprise, here we are. They're now the largest advertising companies in the world. It was obvious to anyone with a spreadsheet and a brain that this was where it headed. The response from the commercial director was, Ricky, our ad sales team isn't very good, so any dollar's a good dollar. Chilling.
Yeah.
Because it was known to everyone even then where this was headed. And yet the industry itself, the news industry itself, walked into the jaws of death. So here we are. None of those people still work in the industry. They've all gone. I think I just heard you, unless I'm wrong, say create scarcity. And the way to create scarcity is to remove yourself from the programmatic market and move back towards direct selling to key clients. Have I got that about right?
And or if this happens enough, there will be ad exchange. There will be SSPs that say, "Well, wait a minute. Why don't we just set standards?" Like, shocking, I know, to think about, but it will be inevitable where they will say, "Well, wait a minute. Can't we compete on quality? What if we become the ad exchange that gets all of the quality inventory?" Right? And then you start a race to the top. But it's not going to happen, in my opinion, until some bold publishers take some big risks. That's just the name of the game.
Could a publisher group? We have a big problem, so we need a big solution. Okay, we're at the point where we have to figure out something big. Why would all the world's publishers not just go to one vendor and king make it for this?
I think I'm shocked that there hasn't been, and you're kind of starting to see it happen a little bit. It's happening in like weird pockets of discussion in the industry, but discussions about curation and the trade desks kind of products where they're kind of pivoting to be more around quality inventory. But all the conversations about quality inventory, we're getting there. Like, I don't think that it's that we're as far off here, but there's a lot of promises about quality inventory and not delivery against quality inventory. So again, to your point, publishers should be should make sure this time they know what they're getting into, which is a kind of a case against doing a one kingmaker solution, right? Like, I don't think that the answer is to then we just create we go back to the start and then run the whole scenario all over again.
Unless the industry owns it. If the industry owned it,
yeah,
you have a chance.
So I heard someone when they were talking about the Google antitrust trial remedies, they're like, well, what if they propose a solution like that? If the industry owned it today, let's be clear that means Google owns it. So it sounds good in theory, but we're talking about the same trade associations that we just established are captured and compromised. So I get it. And it's a good idea theoretically, but you need to first address you need to make sure we don't end up in the same place.
What if the publishing industry owned it?
I went to law school, #not a lawyer. I think there's probably antitrust considerations here, but I don't, but it would be an interesting thought experiment to see what can be done.
Do you know, I'll leave you with this. I spent last night until very, very late having a chat with the futurist at Mercedes-Benz. And he's been there 31 years. And his job is to talk to all of the 100,000 people that work at Mercedes across the world and not talk about building better cars, but to talk about building the company for 50 years' time. So I said to him, so that's electric cars. He was like, it's not electric cars. We're going to run out of resources for batteries. And I'm like, well, it's not oil. And he goes, no, it's not. And I'm like, so what do you think about? And he says, I think about really, really big ideas. Okay, like super big ideas. And he was inspiring because he showed that he was fearless in trying to come up with a vision that moved a global company and potentially an industry into a future that many of us just don't want to really think about at the moment because we're too focused on this minute or this quarter or this finance report or this particular campaign. I would really love there to be an opportunity for visionaries to sit down and just actually draw up what will inevitably have to change if indeed we're going to have any industry of this kind. So that's more of a statement than a question. But what I did want to say to you is that thank you for your work. I know you're fighting on the right side. I appreciate that. And you've been fearless and you've stood by your convictions. And I'm sure we'll talk again, and we'll probably talk again about something equally awful. But I want you to know that I do appreciate the fact that you're trying to lay out a path for us to get through this and out to the other side. So thank you for that.
Thank you, and likewise.
All right. I'll talk to you next time. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in. The Future Media Podcast is a production of Future Media and Ricky Sutton.